You're listening to 15 Minutes, where we feature community leaders sharing what the rest of us should know but likely don't. Hi, Chad Franzen here, one of the hosts of Share Your Voice, where we talk with top-notch law firms and lawyers about what it takes to grow a successful law practice. This episode is brought to you by Gladiator Law Marketing, delivering tailor-made services to help you accomplish your objectives and maximize your growth potential. To have a successful marketing campaign and make sure you're getting the best ROI, your firm needs to have a better website and better content. Gladiator Law Marketing uses artificial intelligence, machine learning, and decades of experience to outperform the competition. To learn more, go to gladiatorlawmarketing.com, where you can schedule a free marketing consultation. My guest today is Chelsea Pagan, partner at Hepner Pagan. Chelsea's journey began in the Bay Area, where she pursued her legal education, earning her Juris Doctor from Santa Clara University School of Law in 2015. Throughout her career, she has been a staunch advocate for families, leveraging her experience in family law to support those in transition. Chelsea's commitment extends beyond her professional roles. She actively engages in volunteer work, including serving as a scorer for Santa Clara County High School's mock trial. Hey, Chelsea, thanks so much for joining me. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, Chad. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, tell me, how and when did you know you wanted to become an attorney?
My parents will say that it was when I was about 7 when I wrote it on, some like second grade form of what I want to be when I grow up. I don't know that I actually understood what that meant at the time. But at some point it never left, right? It was always this continued narrative of, oh, I want to be a lawyer. This is what I want to do. But I don't know that I ever really had a grasp on what that meant until obviously much later. And I entered law school thinking I wanted to do one thing and ended up in a totally different realm. And I think sometimes that's just the progression you get to once you actually experience life a little bit.
So what was it about, the idea of becoming an attorney that attracted you to even going to law school?
Yeah, when I finally made the decision to actually go to law school, I wanted to be a sports agent because I wanted to be able to advocate and negotiate that aspect of negotiating on behalf of somebody, right? And advocating on behalf of somebody, whatever that meant, for something that's going to benefit both sides, right? That's like kind of what about. It's not just benefiting one party. When you're negotiating, you're actually kind of having to see what's going to mutually benefit both sides of this conversation. Otherwise, it's really just, leverage against another person. And so I loved the idea of collaboration. I didn't realize that it was all about collaboration at the time. I think that's another kind of, oh, this is, you don't really realize till you're in it, but it's turned out looking back that it was about the collaboration of coming to that mutual agreement that I think is so attractive, on top of the fact that, when you escalate your education and your profession to lawyer versus just contract negotiator or something else like that, you have the ability to actually walk your client through it and make sure they understand. And that part of the education process when it comes to the legal field, I just always really loved that contact with the client, that contact with the person for something that you're working hard with them to do so that they can accomplish something big for themselves.
Was negotiation or things like that something that you were always told that you were good at, or something you always felt that you were pretty good at?
Yeah, it's one of those things that people say, right? Like, oh, you're good at arguing. And I'm like, well, I don't know that that's a good thing, right? Because some people, and including myself, and I think this is a very lawyerly thing to do. You're sometimes negotiate or arguing or speaking in circles because that's what gets people frustrated enough to give in to what you want them to do, right? If you, I don't believe in the type of lawyering where you're, if you keep saying it over and over again and you say it louder than everyone else and more obnoxious than anyone else, you're going to get what you get your way. Although I know that there is people who take that approach to negotiation, but I definitely realized that I wasn't necessarily willing to just give up because somebody said no. It was more about trying to understand why they said no. And that part of it is what I think people recognized in me at times, is that it wasn't about pressing when somebody says no. It's just understanding why to see if you can overcome it, which is the same reason why people said I would be good at sales, right? It's kind of the same thing, like trying to overcome their objections to what you're saying.
Sure. So you obviously decided not to become a sports agent. What motivated you to pursue a degree in family or specialize in family law?
Yeah, at first I just got a job, right? I was in law school. I was looking for a part-time job to fill in the gaps and also make sure I had in-firm experience. Found a small family law firm to kind of dip my toes in. And I really enjoyed working there just in the sense of the people. And that made it easy to like what I did on a regular basis. But what kept me in and pulled me through for many years before actually opening my own firm was that it really was the most human side of negotiation because this is not some business contract. It's not, a house deal where there'll be some other house, right? These are people's livelihood. It's their children. It's their ability to start a fresh chapter. And this is where the collaboration aspect of what I enjoyed about negotiating really highlighted itself for me is that if I could figure out what the other person wanted and we could accomplish that, the negotiating the overall deal for the family was a lot easier than
Mm.
just forcing your client's position down the throat of this other side, right? And I think that's what kept me in. It's what really pulled me into the process and wanted me to learn more.
So you mentioned you you worked for a boutique family law firm
Mhm.
in the Bay Area during law school. How did that kind of what were some memorable experiences from that, or what did you take away from that primarily, other than it helped push you in the direction toward family law?
Yeah, I mean, I was there 3 years through the last 2 years of law school and my first 2 years licensed. And what I learned is that it really is a choice that you make for how you run your law firm, not only in how you grow a business, but in how you treat your clients. I'm so lucky that, who I worked for, they're still mentors of mine. I still speak to them, have a good relationship with them now, even though, I transitioned away from that. And I also learned what I wanted to do differently. That doesn't mean anything that they were doing wasn't, a positive experience. It's just a different approach to how you run a firm or different approach of how you deal with clients or even the different focus on cases. And so I was able to really separate what did I want my law firm to look like, right? And I had a great business partner who, when we came together, we were able to pull from two local firms different ways to do things and mesh that all together. And so when it came to actually building a practice for ourselves, we had a little bit of experience from the two firms that we worked at that did things differently. And we're also to say, hey, what do we want to do different? And so I'm really, really thankful for that time because you don't really know until you're in it what it takes to build a law firm. And I have so much more appreciation for them for that experience that I couldn't have ever recognized as being, when you're an employee for somebody.
Yeah.
And so that's the aspect that I think when we talk about memorable experiences, in the moment I had no idea. Years later, even now, sometimes things come up and I think of things that happened or conversations we had when I worked there. And I'm like, I understand them now, right? Like I can empathize with them so much more.
Another part of your experience was I think you assisted individuals with consumer rights and employment disputes at the Catherine and George Alexander Community Law Center. How did that kind of
Yeah.
impact your view of that of consumer rights and employment disemployment?
Yeah, I really, really loved that program. So that was a part of being in law school. It was kind of like a clinic that you participate in, you get credit hours for working. That's actually where I met my business partner, Emily Hepner, and we kind of started talking about what we did outside of law school. But it not only gave me perspective of, okay, this is what it takes to run a case, right? Manage a case. We're doing it pro bono, so it's not about attorney's fees, but we still have to track attorney's fees because if we win an argument, we can collect on them. And that's how the clinic makes money. So it gave me that case management experience to help me transition into my own law firm that I thought was so important on top of the work that I did at the firm. But when you're actually managing the case on your own as a law student for these people, it's just a different experience. But when it came to the consumer and employment rights aspect, and the clinic part I did mostly in the consumer, you just understand how easy it is for people to use language and contracts against somebody else. And a lot of the time we were dealing with really big companies, like car companies, credit companies, with in-house counsel who have 25 years plus of experience. And we're just these, second, 30-year law students, getting on the phone, asking if they'll talk to us. And so there's so many aspects that you realize that drafting is so important. Language is so important, and making sure your clients understand all of the language that's in every agreement they're about to sign, because even though things might be going well and everyone agrees to terms and they sign off on it, if there's a situation that somebody can use the language against that other person in the future, you have to believe that that could happen. And in the consumer's rights, when people are signing for purchase of cars, signing for credit cards, phones, all these different things that people do every day, the littlest provision, can really make a difference. And unfortunately, in a lot of these situations, you either get the car or you either sign the agreement they're presenting you, or you don't get the car or you don't get the credit card, because these companies can afford to do that. But, there's consumer rights for a reason, to make sure everyone understands what kind of contracts they're getting into. And so I think that experience really highlighted that, on top of the fact that we don't really get to take on now, right, being in the private sector, pro bono cases as much as we maybe would like, right? Because we have a business to run, we have employees to pay. And so having had such a substantial amount of time to do that in law school was very freeing. It was such a great experience. And I really always support any law student I talk to at Santa Clara. I'm like, go do the clinic. It's the best. It's so much fun. You learn a lot about kind of actually running a firm too, if you're interested in owning your own firm, and also just managing big cases like that. It was a lot of fun.
So how did your firm, Hepner and Pagan, come about then, after all that experience you even got in law school?
Yeah. So Emily and I had stayed in touch. We met, like I said, at the clinic, and we both worked for other family law firms. So we would see each other every once in a while at court, maybe have a case here and there. And we just would kind of make an effort to meet up like quarterly and have dinner together and kind of just swap stories and check in on each other. And then I worked for that firm for 3 years, and I really wanted to push myself into even higher litigation mode to kind of test my skills. So I left for 1 year to go to a different firm to get some additional litigation experience. And it wasn't right for me. It wasn't the right fit. I knew that I wanted to be a business owner. I knew that was the next elevation. I wanted to be able to control the type of clients I was taking on, control the way we presented cases and managed cases, because I just realized I wasn't necessarily aligned with, certain approaches of other people, and that's okay. Right. And so I kind of just made her go out to dinner with me and said, okay, it's now or it's now, right? We're doing this. Like, I need to do this. We're ready. We've had the experience, and we both had very similar views of the type of experience we wanted to create, not only for clients, but for employees. And I think over the course of like 4 months, we would meet, every Wednesday, and build our logo, our website. We'd submit all of our documents. We kind of just got all of our ducks in a row, and we were able to open up June 2018.
Awesome. That's great. So, you had this vision for what you would like to do based on your prior experience, whether it's positive or negative. How soon did that vision actually become kind of reality? Was it as soon as you opened your doors, or after that?
Yeah, I would say that we're always still evolving into that perfect picture that we painted, almost 6 years ago. And you can have this vision, but when you're opening a business, you're also just kind of trying to get clients in the door and be busy. And I'm very thankful that as much as we did take, a good amount of clients that came through the door just as they came, and what cases we can get, we've had excellent clients that really do measure with the values that we presented. And I think that because Emily and I both project ourselves very authentically on the phone with clients, like, look, this is what you're going to get with us. We're not going to be those, bulldogs, or we're not going to be aggressive in the way that you think lawyers need to be aggressive, right? There's one thing of being proactive, or there's one thing of, making sure that you're advocating for your clients and educating your clients. But we're not going to push every little issue just because you want to. We're going to tell you whether it makes sense or not. And at some point, if it doesn't make sense, then we're going to suggest you find an attorney that will pursue that issue for you. Because it's our choice what cases to take at this point. Now, that doesn't mean we don't, we only take on the easy clients or anything like that, but it's about finding clients that value what we're saying and how we're saying it. We're a resolution based firm. We knew from day one we wanted to eventually get to primarily mediation, collaborative, prenups and postnups, and then uncontested divorces. We're still a little bit in the litigation field right now, and I enjoy it here and there. But our goal really has been to make Hepner Pagan a leader in the mediation realm, and each year it's getting progressively closer to that. So we started off by just taking a case here and there. We've done substantial amount of training, and now it's the primary thing that we really focus our marketing on, as well as my day to day. I mean, I used to have mediation cases maybe once a month, and now I have about 10 active in a given month. So that means I'm doing mediation 3 times a week at least, which I love, and prenups on top of that. And then I still have my litigation cases and the clients that I represent on an individual basis. So from a what our cases look like, we are very close to getting, I think, in the next year or so, to primarily what we wanted out of that process. And from a value-based system, we built a team that is in line with what we always wanted to project, which is we can help people get through this process without taking on clients that are there for revenge, that are there for to let their anger shine, which again, there's always going to be that. This is family law. There is an emotional aspect to this, and managing that is so important. But there's clients who are angry, and there's clients who lead with their anger. And we really have been able to help a lot of our clients separate those issues out so that we can continue to help them not spend tens of thousands of dollars in attorney's fees. That we pride ourselves on keeping costs down for our clients whenever possible. And I'm just so proud of how far we've come. But I would definitely say it's an always evolving process.
Sure, sure. How do you keep yourself from maybe getting caught up in maybe some of the emotion involved in some of these cases, especially if you really believe in what you're doing?
Yeah. Some days are harder than others. That's for sure. When you have clients that you just so badly believe in what they're projecting, especially when it comes to the custody and visitation part, I think it's a little bit harder. When
Mhm,
it's the financials, it's a lot easier to keep it business, right? Because it's numbers.
mhm.
The legal arguments are a little bit more black and white. I say that because it's never that clear. But and there's all, the reason we lawyers make money is because there's always openings in some of these things, right? Arguments that you can make. And so the custody and visitation part, I think, is the hardest when you are just you can see that the client is so behind what they believe is in the best interest of the children. And you have to either let them know where you disagree, or let them know likely outcomes, and it's not going to make them happy. It's really hard for a client to come and say, my child is hurting and you're telling me I can't do anything about it. And this is, of course, in a situation where we've already attempted to do something about it, right?
Mhm.
And sometimes that answer is yes, that's what I'm telling you. It's not a perfect system. Family court is always a work in progress. And on top of the fact that you have two parents that are, just different people and are going to have different opinions. So that really is where I find it to be the hardest, but it gets a lot easier when you are working with clients who heed your advice. Back to kind of what I was just saying, when I have clients who are just constantly at odds with me, that doesn't mean they're wrong or I'm right all the time. Um, Especially custody and visitation, there's so much discretion. It's just not that simple. But it's wanting them to feel supported and heard. And if I'm not the person that's the right fit for them to do that, then sometimes it has to be somebody else. And that's the right fit for the client. And it's the right fit for me. Professionally, we have to take things that serve us in that same way. And again, it's not something that happens very often, but it does. And that's okay. Sometimes clients just choose themselves, don't think I'm a good fit, or not doing the job that they want to see for whatever reason. And that's really where you have to kind of keep it business-like, right? You have to say, this isn't personal. This is somebody's life, and they want to make a different choice. They want to make a different choice. And it gets easier over time. I think year one, year two, I took everything a little bit more personal. You're running a business, and you want to succeed, and you want clients to think you're the best, but you're just not going to please everyone, just like in any kind of industry.
So, what would you say maybe are some common misconceptions that people have about family law?
Yeah, I would say that the most common are that just because you two agree on how to operate during a marriage means that that's how it's going to, play out in divorce. Depending on what state you live in, it's so substantially different. And just what you think is common sense likely isn't. Being California, it's a community property state, one of the 9. And that's where I tell people it's most important to educate yourself on family law before you get married, not just in the event of divorce. And so many people just assume, oh, we're married, we're in love, whatever happens, we're never going to get divorced. But obviously, we know that around 50% of marriages end in divorce. And so those people didn't think that they were going to get divorced. But not educating yourself on the nuances of family law and just assuming that because you operate a certain way, that it's going to work out. The things that people tend to be the most shocked about when it comes to at least community property, but it applies in so many other situations is, oh, I owned a house before marriage. And so, as long as I keep paying that mortgage and never put them on title, they don't get anything from the house. Well, in California, if you had a mortgage that you were paying with money that you earned during marriage, it's not exactly the case. There's some reimbursement there. People are always so shocked by that and don't understand. The other thing is, if we keep money separate, that means, they can't get access to any money in the account that I had in my own name. Well, community property state, where was that money earned? Was it earned during the marriage? And so there's just so many assumptions made before you get married. And I think that's a big hole in the system. I don't think there's a lot of premarital planning education out there. And so that's something I talk about a lot. On top of the fact that I really want to encourage people that if you are in the process of getting divorced, try mediation first, right? If it's safe, and I say if it's safe in situations where there's, domestic violence or significant financial abuse in a way where there's no trust there from a financial perspective, it can be very difficult. But try mediation first, going to keep costs down. The cost of attorney's fees is expensive, right? And it's doing is taking money from the honey pot that you two earned during marriage. Even if the other person pays for it, that money's got to come from somewhere, and it's going to be more difficult. So the cost is just such a huge factor. At the same time, you can do some of these things yourself, right? You can if you two are in a good place, but there's so many great resources out there for resolving a divorce that don't look like lawyer on lawyer. And as I'm saying that from a law firm, but I participate in cases so many different ways. Sometimes I'm a divorce coach and I'm in the background. They're negotiating it themselves or working with another mediator. And I'm just here to answer questions along the way. It's a great way to keep costs down. At the end of the day, I want to keep more money in my clients' pockets. I'm going to attribute this to my business partner, but she always used it. She got it from somebody else, which is like, pay for your kids to go to college, not mine, right? So the more money you can keep in your pocket through this process, which means you might give the other person a little bit more or give up on an issue now to move forward. But those are probably the things the most. 2 of those things come with doing the work before, right? Before you get married. I really think that if more people invested time in premarital planning and coming up with a plan, including meeting with lawyers and considering a prenup, that even if you get a divorce, it's going to be a much more simple process.
Okay, that's good. Very good advice. Good to know.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, based on your experience so far since 2018 with your firm, what has been the most rewarding? Maybe was there like a case or an experience that you had that was most rewarding?
Yeah, this is one of my first cases that I ever did when we opened up, and it was a domestic violence case, unmarried couple, really small child. Um, I this client came in, and I just instantly knew that she just needed just a little bit of comfort, feeling protected. She wasn't trying to get back at anybody. Knew that if the person was going to do work, that they were going to have a relationship with their child. She accepted that. She just needed space. And she had very clear evidence to support a domestic violence restraining order. And she was overwhelmed, terrified, didn't feel like it was going to be a process worth pursuing. And when we secured that 5-year restraining order for her, it just felt like one of those moments that, when you go out of your way to do something small, but obviously this was something big, and somebody's so appreciative, you're just holding the door or just doing any little thing you can for another human. that same kind of feeling where you're just like, hey, like she really, really benefited from something I did. And I was just doing my job. But because she was one of my first, I think she actually was maybe my very first client at the new firm, like new client that didn't, come over from prior work. And I'll just never forget her face. I'll never forget her child's face. It's one of those things that I think is so meaningful. And I actually don't do a lot of domestic violence work anymore because it is so draining. It's been really hard. But there's been a couple cases along the way since opening a new firm that, when they're successful and the person feels that relief of comfort. Yes, it's just a piece of paper, but sometimes just that vindication that they were right and a judge agreed that they deserved this is what these people need when it comes to a domestic violence restraining order. At the same time, I've seen, restraining orders abused in the system for the improper purposes. And those ones are just equally as hard, right? To see happen and see play out. But she'll always be one that I kind of frame. And that's a case worth taking, right? A case worth doing work that might feel hard for me because it benefits somebody else so substantially. So I always go back to her because she was the first case.
You talked about how you're maybe a little bit more picky in terms of, when you first started, you were willing to accept maybe a much wider variety of clients than maybe
Right.
you are now. How has your
Right.
approach to has your approach to marketing changed?
Um, yes and no, in the sense that we focus substantially on um very specific keywords, right? We're not going to show up with, cheap family lawyer or affordable, because the reality is that we don't want to have to take on every client to be able to pay our bills, and we're not accessible to everyone. And that simply allows us to say, okay, these people can't afford us, which means it's not going to be a constant battle for payment.
Mm.
And that doesn't mean there's not some excellent clients out there who simply can't afford us, right? They might be great clients, but it would be a struggle to pay us. The reality is sometimes it's not the best fit for that reason, because we're going to come into a case, help them, they're going to run out of money, and then we say, okay, we have to get out. That doesn't help them sometimes. And so you have to find that balance. Additionally, when it comes to marketing, I mean, we are probably like 50% referral, 50% marketing, but we invest a substantial amount in marketing because we want to make sure that we have the reach that we need to build that client list, because we get some great referrals, but again, we're not going to be the right fit for everyone. So when it comes to marketing, keywords is very important. We do a lot of mediation based keywords, a lot of local based keywords. So Campbell family lawyer, Santa Clara, because that's really the client base that we're looking to serve as much as possible. But we focus a lot on keywords and SEO on our website, from blogs, putting that on LinkedIn, a lot of more professional-based networking process as far as our marketing strategy, because other professionals, I think, are much better referrals than just the average person or even a former client, because professionals are going to look a little bit about what's going on in the background to figure out what referral is best. And I think that the clients we get from professional referrals are always the ones where usually if they're connected to us, they hire us, right? Versus like a client who might say, oh, I use this person. But if that is a different case or a different type of personality, again, we're not going to be a right fit. And so I think you really have to know that how you approach that from a organic, like blog post and SEO, well, organic in the sense of, searching versus actually paying for Google ads and things like that. But on top of the fact that, we don't do free consultations really anymore, which is always in family law kind of a little controversy, more of a debate between other lawyers. A lot of people do anywhere from 15 to 30-minute free consultations. We do those for mediation cases because you have two people on board, and we want to make sure that they get access to understand mediation. But for litigation cases, we do paid consultations. And so right from the beginning, even if people find us from a marketing perspective, they're going to call and say, okay, do you offer free? And we say no, and they're going to move on, or they're going to choose to invest. And you always know right away that if someone said, well, I can't afford to pay for an hour, it's like, well, how can you afford to pay for the retainer? And some people will say, I just want to pay for the hour. I don't think I can afford to retain. That's fine, right? Like there's lots of people that pay for an hour here and there. Because again, I do want to be accessible when it's the right situation. But I think you always have to be evolving for what people are looking for, and how people are finding lawyers are substantially based on, what is the value that you can provide them that you're not charging for, right? The blog posts, the social media, the LinkedIn, any access, any speaking engagements, any situations in which you can help people without giving them legal advice, but get them in the right direction, you're providing value. And I think that's what consumers are looking for.
I have one more question for you, but first, just tell me how people can find out more about Hepner and Pagan.
Yeah. Best place is obviously our website, hepnerpagan.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Chelsea A. Pagan Esquire, and I post a lot on there, both about Hepner Pagan and other premarital planning topics. It's my obsession right now of what I'm talking about. And we're also on Instagram and Facebook at Hepner Pagan.
Okay, great. Hey, last question for you. If some young person that you knew came to you and said, I just graduated law school and I'm looking to get into family law, what advice would you give them that maybe they probably never learned in law school?
Yeah, I mean, the first piece of that is to separate whether or not you want to be a family lawyer or whether you want to own a family law firm. Those distinctions, I think, are going to set your career up for where you want to go, because investing time in learning about what it takes to build a law firm, even while you're working for somebody else, is something I wish I would have done from the beginning, because I would have just been much more set up. I would have asked more questions about the dynamics of actual case management of the people I worked for, because running a law firm is one thing and it takes a very different type of person. I know so many great family lawyers that have no interest in owning a law firm. And I think they're some of the better lawyers I know. When you run a law firm, you are spread a little bit more thin. You are pulled in different directions. I know that when the cases that I'm in, I'm focused in. I take on a lot less cases, and I have associate attorneys that take on, the higher need cases on a regular basis so I can run the business. If my business partner told me that I could just run the business and not take on any more cases, I feel like I'd be sad for a little bit. But I would really love it, because that aspect has really drawn me in over the years of actually running the law firm and what it takes. But people are not built the same, right? And I have lots of people who I know who I feel like if they worked for somebody else, they would be even better than they are, but they work for themselves or they have their own firm, and it shows at times. And I think that's where Emily and I really thrive, is we take on just enough to do the things we enjoy, like the prenups, the mediation, some of the, contested cases for the clients that are, a good fit for us. And then we delegate everything else to our associates who do such a great job. So the number one thing is to figure out if you want to be a family law lawyer or if you want to own a family law firm, because it takes a different breed.
Sure, I would imagine. I'm guessing they don't teach you how to run a business in law school.
No, they don't. And they don't teach you even how to navigate a law firm and case management. I think they're starting to open the doors of some of those cases, but I feel like that's had a class been offered like law firm management, I would have taken it 100%, because it's only adding value. Luckily, I worked both in the clinic during law school and for another family law firm, where I felt like I at least understood what it was going to take once I graduated. But actually operating the business and doing that, I think, is crucial. And so many lawyers are at a disadvantage when they choose to open their own firm, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah, that's too bad. Hey, Chelsea, it's been great to talk to you today. Thank you so much for your time and all of your insights. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. I really appreciate it too. I had a good time.
So long, everybody. Thanks for listening to 15 Minutes. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.